Hello, my name is Kristin Snowden. Thank you for joining today. My monthly webinars are about kind of understanding and identifying healthier relationship dynamics, finding healthy balance, and I guess also self-personal growth kind of concepts. So recently, in the past few webinars, I have been doing a series on change. And the idea is that if you're chiming in and you want to hear this material, more often than not, it's because you're in a deep state of hurt. Maybe you uncovered a partner's unknown addiction or some other betrayal like infidelity, or the relationship in general is just not working, or you're out of the relationship and it's been very painful and difficult for you to kind of wrap your head around what's been going on. How did I get stuck in this pattern? How do I make sense of this? And how do I not have this happen again, right? A lot of us, when we're in that state of change, we don't want to be this way anymore. And we certainly want to get out of the pattern that might have led us there to begin with. So I've been kind of talking about these series of change. How do we embrace change, identify change, explore change, accept change, and maintain healthy levels of change? So my first section, I think it's up on my YouTube channel, is how to make lasting change. And that was just understanding how our physical selves, our physiological bodies receive stress. So any kind of change stimulus, and how our bodies really struggle with any kind of altering our neurological paths of what we're used to, and how we really struggle with that. Even if the way that we're doing things isn't working for us, we still struggle with altering it. The second webinar that I did was, I think it's titled on my YouTube channel, The Most Important Thing You Can Do to Change, which is where I kind of discuss the differences between making behavioral changes, so kind of what I call these formula specific grocery lists of these are the things I gotta do, versus a deeper level of change, which is the internal, intrinsic soul spiritual changes that happen. And that's kind of where we talk about fear and shame and embracing our flaws and struggles. Basically, we want to get out of this cycle of kind of doing the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, but just hoping for different results. Again, because our brain's used to that, we will sometimes just keep doing what we know and what we're used to. What is that? The evil that we know, the lesser two evils. We do that with our relationships, with our jobs, sometimes in parenting, with even like our dieting behaviors. We want to create soul and internal change by accepting and embracing our own imperfections. We're supposed to be flawed and make mistakes. And in fact, it's in those states when we're owning and embracing and kind of leaning into the fact that we fall short, that sometimes we directly or indirectly are capable of causing harm or pain, just like others can directly or indirectly cause us harm and pain. It's in those moments that our kind of mind and body expand to a deeper level of complexity and compassion. So we can kind of experience more grace and forgiveness for ourselves, versus like kind of fighting it and hiding it and putting up all these facades to say, you know what, I screw up, but as long as I am attractive or smart or make a certain amount of money, or I volunteer at the PTA, or I give to charity, these are all the facades that I gotta put up because I'm trying to hide or ignore or not embrace the fact that I'm just flawed. Like I wake up and I put my feet on the ground already flawed, already knowing that I'm going to fall short, but I'm going to do the best that I can. So it's just kind of understanding, generally speaking, that our soul will grow and prosper when we do embrace this like flawed and humble state. And the more you're invested in keeping up a front that this is not the case, the more you try to control those contingencies is often the more miserable you'll be. So to continue on this conversation, I want to kind of say, I share a little bit of my journey, but I became interested in the 12 steps. And actually I was talking about this a little bit more in a podcast that I recently did with Rob that I will try to post on my own channel. I haven't done that yet, but I became interested in 12 steps kind of by accident. I don't identify as an addict of abusing substances. So clients will often ask me that, are you in recovery? What's your background in recovery? And I'm comfortable with sharing that, especially when I share my version of step one. But basically, I was really exposed to it. Obviously, when I started working in addiction, I knew some family friends whose lives had been changed by 12 steps. And I also knew almost as many who despised 12 steps because, again, they felt like it was very legalistic, black and white, etc. So when I was exposed to 12 steps when working in addiction, again, in the mental health world, I was in a phase of my life where I was very turned off by any kind of established, again, like legalistic, highly structured type beliefs being pushed on me. For my own personal issues, I was raised in a established like church, and I felt very at that time like very betrayed by concepts around Christianity and established structured churches. So I was kind of very anti that. And then it also made me quite cynical about this concept of 12 steps. Like, okay, so there's just going to be this magical thing that happens when I read these 12 steps, and suddenly I'm going to be a changed, better person, or better yet, like clients are going to suddenly start doing these things and they're going to magically be changed. Like, please tell me these magic formulas, because the only experience I had about that thus far is when I was exposed to these kind of structured beliefs and isms. All I found was rejection and harm and hurt, and all the things that I tried to like protect and save myself from, I had to deal with anyway. So anyway, so I came into the 12 steps with that. So I want to say that I appreciate the cynicism, and I appreciate and can hear the fear of it and the hurt of it, because I get it. But through a deep intrigue, I think just by a general intrigue, I wanted to know more about it. And I think is also because I was in such a state of pain and hurt myself that I was like grasping at anything and everything to just change that status. So basically I just continued to read books. I felt like I worked under Dr. Rob Weiss, and I really loved hearing his interpretations and explanations and applications of how he read the 12 steps. I did a lot of training and work under the 12 steps. I've gone to 12-step meetings. Obviously, I've worked with a lot of people who do that program as well. And it was from that I guess I had a resurgence, a rebirth, a better understanding of all these concepts. And so I kind of want to share that with you. I want to share with you how I've heard the 12 steps. And then I've also asked Tammy, the co-host, to kind of engage with me, to kind of go back and forth about how we hear these concepts and how they resonated in us and how they've affected us. So I'm not going to go through all 12 steps. I think I'm just going to start with maybe step 1 and step 2, and maybe if there's enough time, step 3, and then we'll just go from there. So step 1 is we admit that we're powerless to our addiction and that our lives have become unmanageable. So this is maybe one of the more basic concepts, yet the biggest, most important one, which is essentially, look, you just need to kind of own that there's a problem, that something's not working in your life. Again, a lot of the people who are listening, their marriages might be falling apart, their entire reality construct. So maybe if you defined yourself as a spouse, as a parent, as a high functioning person of society, and because of or maybe a certain religion or doing well in your job, and because of this crisis that has hit your life, none of those things make sense anymore. You know, if you're not even really sure about marriage or monogamy, you're not even really sure about, do people tell you the truth or not, are they trustworthy or not, you've experienced probably so much emotional instability and so much fear and hurt that it's hard for you to be this high functioning, high performing person. So basically there's this embracing that life as I know it isn't working anymore, that I am flawed, that this world's flawed, that the people that I've loved have fallen short and are flawed, and just things aren't going well. That concept like might sound simple behaviorally, but for it to truly sink in can be very difficult. I've said a few times, but I'll say it again, that if I ever had a chance to talk to a higher power, or my version of God or a higher power, I'd want to know why humans are created with this like really deeply confusing counterintuitive design, which is that we only seem to learn and grow the most when we're in this deep level of discomfort and struggle. I mean, I'll say it even down to the atom level or the cellular level. It's physiologically our body tends to grow under stress and struggle, and emotionally our bodies grow under stress and struggle. So, and then the other counterintuitive concept is, why does embracing that we are powerless to something, powerless to whatever this is actually the ultimate strength. Richard Rohr, who's a writer that I've been reading a lot recently, and he writes a little bit about the 12 steps. And I thought he said this really well to kind of explain step one. Until you bottom out and come to the limits of your own fuel supply, there is no reason for you to switch to a higher octane fuel. You will not learn to actively draw upon a larger source until that original source has been depleted. And in fact, you won't even need or even know that there is a larger source until those initial sources and resources fail you. So it's this idea that once you own that there's a problem, suddenly, physiologically, emotionally, environmentally, everything starts changing to help you go from, you know, a lower octane fuel supply to a higher octane fuel supply, from that certain level of resources to a deeper, more complex level of resources and supply that you needed. And that's kind of where the magic happens. It's usually not pretty. It's pretty freaking brutal. It usually feels terrible, often like you're dying, but done right, that's the end result. Our ego and pride often get in the way of step one because our instincts, like I've said in the previous two webinars, are to avoid change at all costs, even if the current situation isn't working, because change feels like death sometimes. It's scary. Our brain's not used to it. It wants to do the same exact thing over and over again because it takes minimal blood supply, minimal oxygen, and we can just go. Instead, we continue to do what doesn't work, and we just think and hope somehow it'll just change naturally. But it's actually in these moments of unmanageability where we should find that we need a new manager. And that brings us to step two. And so we'll just get to probably these two steps because I want to hear Tammy's input on this. But step two is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. So I'm a control freak, and I love to make myself believe that everything I need is within my own little locus of control. So this concept, I mean, even though I was raised in an environment where I was kind of born into thinking there's this higher power, there's this something greater than us, I didn't naturally have the idea that like this higher power could restore my sanity, right? It's kind of like I thought this higher power was kind of up there making the sunrise and other people's lives better, but I was like, I'm good, I got it, I'm amazing, I can do this, thanks. So it took me a lot of years to put down my defenses and give up attempts to control, manage, and then thereby end my cycle of insanity. I joke that I feel like I had it kind of almost beaten out of me in a knockdown, drag out street fight. Just a lot of these life incidences, medical issues, and deaths, like unexpected deaths, are obviously marital issues as well, that were just things that were out of my, all my greatest thinking and all my greatest, all my tools that I have in my little toolbox and all the gold stars and trophies that I'd received, none of them could fix those problems. And so it wasn't until then that I realized that I needed something or someone greater and bigger than me to help me get out of this deep hole that I found myself in. And again, Richard Rory kind of starts talking about, okay, so how do you embrace this concept of step 2? And he was saying that he feels like you need to open what he calls like your mind, body, and heart spaces. So opening your mind is kind of spending more time in that mindfulness, contemplative space, right? So instead of me, I joke with clients, and I'm the same way, that I'm safe in my head of like, okay, these are the list of things that I need to do. This is how I'm going to dominate today. This is how I'm going to, this is how I'm going to say and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to be in order to get this specific outcome. And, he challenges you to kind of sit in that stillness and that quiet space where nothing's defined and you're not in control, and kind of learn to move to that next space, right? Because that next space is not dualistic. It's not, I do this and then I get this prize, or this is how, this is what happens when you do this, it's either this or that, and move you into a more uncertain, uncomfortable state of, well, it could also be this, or it could also be that, right? So a lot of you dealing with betrayal, there's this mind messing up thing where it's like, okay, the person who hurt me most is the person that I love, right? Or this person made really, really bad decisions and has this really big issue, but I still want this relationship to work. Or I'm petrified of being alone, but that might still happen. And these ideas of, a dualistic mind would just be very like, if this happened, I must be valueless. Or if this happened, you're either a good person or a bad person. Or all relationships will be painful and hurtful and everyone's untrustworthy, versus moving into this non-dualistic concept where some people are untrustworthy and some people are, some people are trustworthy and some people are not. Some people do cause you pain, or moments in a relationship will be painful, but not all the time. And though I feel valueless, that's just my shame talking. And really, there are many things I fall short and I'm flawed, but I am always valuable. So it takes a lot of kind of time and energy to move into that complex headspace, especially if you're controlling, black and white thinker. I joke that like you think life runs in cash and prizes and, very specific outcomes for certain behaviors. I wanted to buy into that, and it didn't, I was insane from it. So last thing too, is he mentions moving into this like kind of body space too, which is another word he's trying to say for your trauma gets held up in your body, in your heart space and your body space, which is he's trying to say you need to identify your hurts and your wounds and shame from your childhood all the way up to now, because these wounds and hurt and pain, we behave often out of a lot of this hurt and this pain, and these kind of voices in our head telling us, you're not enough, people are bad, you're bad, and then you start doing that tap dance to try to be enough. You start running on that treadmill to be good enough, smart enough, and make people like you. And then the body space is kind of an acknowledgement that when you are traumatized, when you've experienced disappointments, hurt, pain, abuse, neglect, abandonment, that's held tightly in your body. You know, your body remembers the negative. It's partially for survival skills, but then it's also can be quite counterproductive for the rest of the time in life, other than when you're running away from the bear, right? And so there's the book, what is it, the how the body, what is it, the vessel can't,
body keeps score.
The body keeps score. I recently, a few webinars before, talk about betrayal trauma and kind of the physiological things that are going on inside you. And I mentioned some treatments that kind of help you release the body response to trauma. So I'll leave you with this one last concept around step 2. I think this was also in the book I was reading, but the quote is, behavioral changes are for those avoiding hell, but spiritual, emotional changes, you know, internal, intrinsic changes are experienced by those who have been through hell. So like behavioral changes is sort of like, I'm going to do this so I get this end result, versus when I'm ready to make a deeper, more soul spiritual change, it's like, I've been through hell already. My will is broken and I'm not the one in control because I thought I was, and my life sucks. And so, or it's just not working. I'm in so much deep pain and harm and hurt that I just have to believe that there's something out there, a greater power than me, that can help me manage this. And it's just saying that spirituality and mystery is all around us all the time. And we have to have our hearts, minds, and bodies open to it. And that's it for this webinar, because we'll keep talking about it as we go on.
You mentioned about the facades, and I think about the unmanageability and the facade of, you know, I had this vision of, I'm out in a windstorm trying to rake leaves, and I want to have the facade that my yard is all perfect, but the leaves are all blowing all over chaos. And I think I had felt so much of that I was trying to have this perfect image, but you know, things, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't have everything all nice and tidy and neat. And so the unmanageability, you know, in my case, the addiction, you know, ended up showing itself in a pretty obvious way. But you know, the unmanageability, I still believed that I was holding up this facade of, you know, I look good and, you know, I've got this under control. Like you were talking about, I've got all of this under control. Well, I didn't. And I think you know, the fear that I was constantly living with is, I'm going to get discovered. I'm going to get discovered that I'm a phony, you know, because I have this facade of this, but that's not really who I am. And so learning to embrace change, but also embrace my humanity and imperfection was, you know, was hugely important for me. I was thinking too, you were talking about the good and the bad. I so equated, and this took a long time and a lot of practice. Among my addictions, you know, was an eating disorder, and if I ate wrong, and I'm using this language intentionally, if I ate wrong, then I was bad. I had to learn to go, okay, I didn't do such a great job with my food choices today, but I still have value. It didn't make me a bad person. And I had to move away from that language. The other language you mentioned, that, you know, all people will hurt you. And I had to, again, you know, I'm a person of extremes. So I had to, for myself, move away from always and never and all and none, you know, all of those things that are way out on the extreme, because, you know, yeah, some people are going to intentionally hurt me. Some people are going to hurt me just because we're human, and, you know, I hurt people. I don't mean to hurt people, but, you know, I can do that. So that's what amends are for. But things aren't as black and white as I always want them to be. I'm going to say that because I want it to be very clear that this is good, this is bad, and, you know, it's very boundaried, and it's not. And so there's a whole lot of gray. There's a lot more gray than there is the black and white for me. So that was really helpful for me to learn to live in that in-between space. Challenging. You know, you're talking too about the behavior and you know how the body keeps score. And I had this issue that was recurrent. I was able to identify it, and I went to therapy, and you know, after a few sessions, I have gratefully not experienced it since, but it was, I called it white hot rage. And it would be one of those things where, like, you know, something, I'd be fine, and the next thing you know, I'd have this, and it was white hot rage, and I had to keep myself away from people because I really couldn't. I was afraid of what I would say that I'd have to make amends for and all that kind of stuff. And what I finally learned was it was tapping into a deep hurt. And for me, I don't like feeling hurt because that feels weak to me. And so I'd rather be rageful because that's a power. So then I can be angry, and that's powerful and big, versus hurt felt weak and small. And so, you know, I had to, you know, I had to do some therapy around that, but I'm grateful because I was like, this is not serving me well anymore. But it was, you know, like you're talking about, this kind of primal hurt. Did some therapy on it, really identify even where the hurt came from, but, you know, was able to tap into that. And gratefully now I've not had to experience the white hot rage, and no one else, even more gratefully, no one else has had to experience my white hot rage, you know, so it wasn't serving me well. And but it was worth making the change that we're talking about. You know, it was worth me going and exploring where that hurt was to make the change.
Because you're keying in on one thing that's really interesting that I always hear from 12-steppers, which is this this learning and growing is on a continuum, right? Absolutely. There's no like, I'm healed, I'm great. It's this idea that I love. And I know people are like, oh, 12 steps, this doesn't work. But one thing I appreciate is those who truly embrace this concept is there's no like, I'm healed. There's no end to this process. There's this one issue will pop up, and then I'll work on it, and then that'll be okay. And then another issue pops up.
In my personal growth, I am able to identify that, you know, right now, if I look at it and look at myself 2 years ago, I like who I am more now. And I'm confident in 2 more years, I'll be able to do the exact same thing. So it's one of those things where I can see that progression, and I'm never going to arrive, but I'm constantly working towards that. And I spend more hours of more days at peace with myself and with others. My relationships are not constantly in chaos, which is what my entire life was. And I don't have the tolerance for the chaos anymore. Because I don't live in it, I lived in it. And now I don't have that chaos, but I don't also have the tolerance. So I want to do whatever I can to get back to having things as restored as possible. That means I'll pick up the phone and go, you know, I'm really muffed up, and you know, I need to make amends, and I want to set this right. And I work to do that. And most days, you know, my successful day is that my relationships are in pretty good shape and all that, not how many things I crossed off the to-do list, and, you know, to be a good person. So
right now it's like, I like looking at the context, like you were sharing content, a story, which was great, but contextually, I'm just thinking in my head, you don't see this everywhere. You don't see someone who's willing to share these very embarrassing, like extremely flawed, I lost my temper, I was like, the worst part of my character came out, like character defects all over the place. Societally, our instinct is to hide that.
Yes.
To cover it up with like a nice outfit,
yes,
money to charity,
yes,
performance, kind words. No one, I mean, generally speaking, in our society, there is no place to show how imperfect we are. Yet we've all had incidences like that. And that is what I do love about the fellowship of like a 12-step type environment is those who are doing it right. Because let's own that not everyone who is a part of a 12-step program does it right. They can be just as like any kind of religious group. There can be just as much judgment, legalistic, inflexibility, trying to make certain whatever is uncertain and just open-ended and changing in life. They try to make it concrete and very certain because that's what makes them feel safe and comfortable and in control. So yes, there's absolutely that piece. But those who have truly embraced it have just this openness and this humanity and this humbleness that you just don't see anywhere else, where
Well,
you can truly be you.
and that's exactly right. And when you go to a 12-step meeting, people are laughing over stories that are painful and whatever, and they're going, oh yeah, I did that too, or I had that
I
too.
did that too.
And so it removes the shame, and we can laugh at that stuff and go, in my moments now, would I choose to do those things? No, but that was part of my story to get me where I'm at right now. And I'm grateful because I needed every single painful piece, like you were talking about, why is it that we have to have, why do we have to have the horrible stuff in order to get to the place where we tap into the higher octane? I was thinking it's interesting too, because like muscles are the same way. It's like you have to tear up your muscles in order to build new muscles, so you have to fatigue them bad enough so that they actually break down the muscle fiber in order to build stronger muscles. So it seems like it's throughout our psyche and every other part of us that we have to get to that. The other thing I think too is I had to be that broken because otherwise I kept thinking I could do it on my own, which clearly wasn't working. But my automatic response was, I can do this, and I can keep that facade up. All I have to do is like have people think that, and I was still successful doing the job I was doing, and nothing to write home about, but it was, I was still showing up for work. I was still doing my deal and all that kind of stuff, but my life was just chaos. So
I always hesitate with talking about 12 steps with people who don't identify as addicts, because I feel like there's often this misconception or even like a hesitation and a reluctance and understanding, or maybe I'm just projecting my own stuff. But when you're hearing about the possibility or the application of 12 steps in your own life, is there like this doesn't make sense to me, or I don't understand how this applies to me, or does any of this resonate? But similar to a lot of people writing lots of books on different religions and interpretations of religion, there are also a lot of people who add their own thoughts and feelings about what recovery looks like, their story with recovery, their interpretation of the 12 steps. I mean, there's this one again, like I said, the Richard Rohr book on 12 steps. I mentioned like Russell Brand in the last webinar, and he writes, it's a book called Recovery. Those are just two to say that there are many, many, many. And I think you'll find with everything, you won't buy into or believe or resonate with everything that they say. But I've just found that all these types of material that I continue to explore, I'll hear it differently each time I listen to it. Pieces will point out and resonate with me. Or more importantly, since I am someone in the helping profession, I might share something with someone else that maybe it didn't resonate with me, but it did resonate with them. I think one of the worst things that can happen after you feel betrayed and you uncover these unknown addictions, there's this tendency or this knee-jerk reaction to continue to hide in secrecy and shame, right? Maybe you're one of the only people in the neighborhood who's getting divorced, or whose partner like cheated on you or has an addiction that you know of. And so the instincts are to continue to hide this. But I hope that you've kind of heard, even just from Tammy's willingness to have that candid honesty about her shortcomings, that is where the freedom comes from. That's where the camaraderie is built, is when you can find a group of people where you don't have to continue to hide these things going on in your life, that you don't have to feel all this shame. Brene Brown says that shame cannot live where it's, in the light, when you're speaking the truth of it. And then when other people say, me too, I've experienced this as well, I get it, and I certainly don't judge you for it, it kind of allows the shame to dissipate. And there's so much shame involved in being betrayed and being hurt in a relationship, that you've got to find some people around you, maybe not in a 12-step environment if you're not ready for that, but some people where you can just have this candid honesty of, this is how I've screwed up, this is how other people have harmed me, tell me your stories, let's not judge each other, there will be hypocrisy, and we'll try our best to be perfectly imperfect, all of us together. So sharing is important, camaraderie and fellowship is important. Please secure that, or make sure that they are safe. And obviously, you know, I've done other webinars on practicing boundaries, so please also make sure that you get your boundaries you know, really well defined and understand those as well. Yes. If anyone has any further questions, you're welcome to email me. So my email's on the website, and yeah, I appreciate all those who participated and engaged.